Welcome this afternoon, folks. We're really pleased that you are here and that you're joining us as we launch the Home Family Housing Voucher Program. I'm Sarah Phillips. I'm the director of the State Office of Economic Opportunity and the Department for Children and Families. I'm going to just kick us off today and then hand it over to my colleagues, Sandrine and Jess at CVOEO to talk more about the project. So the Home Family Housing Voucher Project is really modeled off something many of you are familiar with, which was the CARES Housing Voucher Program. This is something that CVOEO and collectively a number of agencies in the state of Vermont participated in during the pandemic with some funding from HUD. It provided 12 to 18 months of rental assistance for households experiencing homelessness to help them get into housing and provided support services to help them maintain that housing. It was by many measures considered really successful, and we learned a lot in that project. CVOEO administered the rental assistance and local agencies provided support services, and over 262 households were exited from homelessness through the CARES Housing Voucher Program. And the vast majority of those were able to transition to a permanent housing choice voucher through the Vermont State Housing Authority. So we're really excited to kick off what's sort of what we learned and to really replicate that project in many ways. So the Home Family Housing Voucher Program is statewide. Rental assistance, again, up to 18 months of rental assistance, this time focused on serving Vermont families with children who are experiencing homelessness. And it's really a part of our toolbox that we're implementing towards solving family homelessness. The idea is that voucher applications will start being accepted February 1st, and households will have approximately 12 to 18 months of rental assistance. We're really excited to kick off, and you'll hear in a little bit, with 100 vouchers that will be issued, and you'll hear about how those will be issued and how to help clients access those. And also really excited that the governor has included in his budget adjustment an additional $3 million for this project. Please mute yourself, folks. Thank you. And great. And with that additional $3 million, we would anticipate being able to serve another 150 families with children. So that's really exciting. And here's what we're looking at 100 vouchers to begin with. We at AHS looked at the data around where families are experiencing homelessness and an initial allocation of those vouchers. We looked at data around GA emergency housing, transitional housing, and shelter data, and then started with an assumption that no district would receive less than 5 vouchers to start with, and push some extra vouchers towards some of our communities that have larger populations. We also combined St. Johnsbury and Newport. These vouchers will be filled through the coordinated entry process, and they are for families with children who are experiencing homelessness, meaning that they're in a shelter. Currently, they're in the transitional housing program at DCF, or they're in the emergency housing program. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sandrine and Jess, who are going to walk you through a little bit more about the process, the resources that CVOEO is bringing to the table, and then we'll have lots of time for Q&A at the end. So thanks, Sandrine and Jess.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everyone, for being here. So we're going to talk to you about CARES 2.0. This is one of the name that we used somewhat at CVOEO to describe our name, the Home Family Housing Vouchers. So feel free to write a note your questions that we're going to ask at the end. I'm going to go through these 12 slides, or for me, actually, it's only 8. And hopefully we'll be able to answer all of your questions. So first and foremost, who is eligible for home family housing vouchers? So to be eligible, Sarah said it, the household needs to have a dependent, have dependent children. So it means that we have been very flexible when it comes to the definition of children, but mostly it's, of course, the child needs to be under 18. It includes foster care, conditional, custody, pregnancy, households, and or expecting. And also, we will definitely look into other factors when it is necessary. The second criteria would be to be meeting the category 1 and category 4 of the definition of homelessness. That's not, I think, a surprise, as CARES was actually meeting the same criteria. So for the one, I can actually, you have the image there, for literally homeless and fleeing and attempting to flee domestic violence. So those two categories will be the ones that people will need to meet in order for them to be eligible for this voucher. Of course, the household will not be receiving any rental assistance through any other subsidized housing programs. They will need to meet the 30% total income, or net monthly income of more than 30% of the total income, and participate to the coordinatory process in order for them to be prioritized and moving through the prioritization and be matched to a voucher. So the next slide will give you a very, well, I wanted to show the flow chart, so the slide before that would be great. Erin?
And Jane, it's not showing up. It went from this one to this one. Is it this one that you want?
Yes, the procedures. So this flow chart will be available in our website because the website is already up. So we'll see it. This shows you actually the flow of the application, and not only for the participation of the participant from applying to, of course, extension and transfers if they are eligible for those. So yeah, we can move to the next slide, which is how to submit an application. Fantastic, isn't it? So as you have noticed, our slides are very busy. It's because we wanted to give you as much information in this presentation that you could actually take notes, and you'll be able to ask questions at the end, but also to connect with us, since we already have not only the email and phone for the program already up. So the information is on the website. How to submit an application. Of course, I was saying previously that the household needs to be selected through this coordinated entry prioritization process. And the hope is that they will be assigned a housing case, housing support worker, that will help them actually going through the application process and the participation to our program. So what do you need as documentation in order for the application to be considered complete? Because I can tell you, if we do not receive all these documents, this application will not be complete. This will actually delay the process of the application. So we will definitely advise you before sending a packet, an application packet, to have all of this documentation attached to it. This is something that we have learned through CARES. We don't want to delay any applications whatsoever. So you need a copy of, of the household IDs, income information. The housing worker housing status verification letter can also be the standard coordinated entry verification letter that is submitted through the coordinated entry agency. And of course, there will be, this is new, housing service support worker service agreement. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. So all the applicants 18 years old or older and the housing support worker must sign the application. We have seen at the last for the last program, we have seen a lot of incompletes that we had to return because they were not signed. So make sure that when an applicant is ready to have these signatures already on the application. And there is two ways to submit the application at this time. It's actually by mail. You can mail it to at CVOEO, PO Box 1603, in Burlington, Vermont, or to email it to home.fhvp@cvoeo.org. So next, how do we make a decision about this application? So we have not changed that from the CARES voucher process. So there will be a pre-approval and a final approval period or process. The pre-approval, of course, is once the application has been submitted and received and processed, and then all the criteria have been met, all the documentation has been submitted, then we move forward with the pre-approval. The applicant and the housing service worker will be receiving a notice that the application has been pre-approved. That will actually unlock them, unlock the ability for them to look for housing. And instead of 60 days that were for CARES, we actually increased the period to 90 days. But it's 90 days from the date of the pre-approval notice. The other plus that we have added to this is that the applicant, if the applicant is not able to locate housing within those 90 days, they may request a 30-day extension. And we have had a very hard time getting to the point of a very smooth process when it comes to those extensions. There will be one extension, a 30-day extension. It needs to be in writing. So it needs to be submitted to us via email will be the preferred method that the applicant will be requesting an extension. If we do not receive this extension request 3 days before the 90-day deadline, we will have to actually deny the application at that time. So please, for housing service workers listening, make sure that you do submit in writing that request or with the applicants 3 days before, because that's also delay the final approval process. So once the applicant is located their housing, the unit, it's definitely better for the housing worker to make sure to notify CVOEO within 5 days, for 15 days of assuring that that housing might be identified. We understand that sometimes it's not as easy to do, but the earlier you do notify, the faster we are able to actually approve the application and to submit payments to the landlord. And we know that most landlords are definitely worried when it takes a long time for a payment to be submitted. So what do you need in order for you to be final, for the approval, for the application to be final, to get a final approval? Of course, the housing inspection notice. You need a signed FMR, which is the fair market rent, and a rent reasonableness form, signed, completed and signed. You need also a signed CBOEO home family housing voucher release of information. And of course, the executive lease agreement and a home lease addendum. All these forms that I'm citing right now, they are available on our website. So you can just go and click and print or download the form to be used. One other thing is that, yes, we are adamant, you need to have all these required documents to us. And the preferred time will be 15 days before the rental has been located. So now, we have said from the beginning, it's a 12 months to 18 months voucher. So after a year, of course, we have the annual review process that we will be conducting, and then participant will have the opportunity to extend that voucher to 18 months. So in order for the household to be considered for an extension, the annual review form needs to be completed. It has to be completed at least a month prior to the expiration of the voucher as listed on the lease addendum. And that is because, of course, if it is extended, we want to be able to pay the landlord on time for the next period. And the tenant must be, of course, in good standing in the current housing, meaning no lease violations. The rent needs to be updated and in good standing. Working to sustain long-term housing stability, and of course, below 50% of the area income. One thing that we did not go through at this time, and I don't know, Ari, if we will be able to go back to the housing support worker.
Yep, I can do that after this slide.
Okay, wonderful. So, like I was saying earlier, all these forms are on the website. So the process is simple. You complete the annual review form. You attach the new lease addendum for the new period, and the lease if necessary. So if the participant has located new housing or is transferring, we're gonna need a new lease and a new lease addendum. Income information is also required at that time. And all the applicants 18-year-old or older and the housing support worker must sign that annual review form as well. And that could be emailed to us, home.fhvp@cvo.org. So now, how do you actually transfer units? Well, we have limited the access to that option for participants. It needs to be, they need to have some VAWA protection in place, have some habitability issues within the unit. And that's, of course, we need proof of that. It could be, let me give you an example of health officer or code enforcement officer report saying that that major issue in the housing. If the participant receives the non-renewal of the lease or a no-cause eviction, they are also eligible to transfer unit. Housing plan, of course, that will be definitely required in the sense that we need to know that some work has been done in continuing and sustaining the housing stability of the participants, because this voucher is a temporary voucher, it's not a permanent voucher. So, we do not have any matching or process that will give preference to this voucher for a permanent voucher, housing choice voucher at this time. So, working diligently with the participant or your clients to stabilize their housing is definitely something that we will look at. It's something that we learned from CARES 2.0, but I'll talk about that later when we get to that slide. So how do you transfer units? The process is simple again. You complete the annual voucher review form. You do have to complete another form, which is the transfer request form. And you attach the new lease and the new lease addendum, of course, income information, and of course, all the signatures of applicants that are 18-year-old or older, and the housing support worker needs to sign it as well. You email the whole packet or all the documents to our email at that time.
Do you want to talk about
Yes.
the housing support worker? Okay, I'll go to that
Yes.
side.
Thank you. So what we have learned from CARES as well is that it's definitely very important that housing support worker knows what they're responsible for. Within the program, the support is real. We know that our families are going out of homelessness. And there is some specifics that we have listed here that you should take into consideration when being matched to a family. Or one following a family towards the approval process for a voucher. So housing navigation is something that most of you are familiar with. Housing support, and that's to preparing them to move into permanent housing with the help of this voucher. Housing retention services, so ongoing support, coordination of services, referrals as well, that will help the household to stabilize that housing that they just got. You need to agree to meet, because this is something that was definitely somewhat challenged last time. We do know that sometimes clients disappear and they're very difficult to connect with. But I will definitely ask for the housing support worker to do his due diligence to at least meet with them once a month to get some form of connection. It could be via email, it could be via phone, it could be in person, but during their participation to this housing voucher program, at least once a month, is something that we will actually ask to the housing support worker to do. Notify us when there is any danger of losing that housing. Very, 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 very difficult situations within the good standing of the housing. And specifically when you do or do not have the connection needed, at least once a month with the applicant or with the participant. And for that,
Sandrine?
of course, yes.
Yeah, Sandrine, I just wanted to jump in for a second. For agencies that were a part of the CARES housing voucher program, you know that we funded organizations specifically to provide housing support services. In this instance, there is not a separate funding for housing support workers. And the term housing support worker is not because someone has that as their position title or is necessarily does housing work as 100% of their work. It's just the term being used right now to say every single client who is submitting an application must have an advocate or case manager or equivalent who is working with them to provide housing supports, who will do these things, and who signs the application, helps submit the application, helps the process of helping them get housed, and will help them retain their housing. And so there's a new piece where housing support worker, where who's ever identified to do that work will be signing off to say, yes, I'm agreeing to do these things. So that could be somebody who has housing case manager as their title. It could be a reach up case manager. It could be someone else in the community. That might depend on the household. It might depend on the organizations in the community that have capacity. It could be somebody in family supportive housing, right? So it's a number of organizations that could step up and do this work. So I just wanted to make that clear because that's a really big distinction between the CARES Housing Voucher Program. Thanks for letting me jump in, Sandrine.
Thank you, Sarah, for clarifying this point. I was about to say that having a housing plan is definitely suggested. That will help with being able to keep track of what has been done when it comes to sustainability within the voucher, and not only the voucher, but the life of the households of the participants. I think that I am done with this portion of the presentation, and I will let Jess talk to you about additional resources within the program. Jess?
Great. Thank you, Sandrine. Hi, everyone. I'm Jess Hyman with CBOEO's Housing Advocacy Programs, and I focus on fair housing and our education and outreach. So as Sarah mentioned, the folks will be working with the home family housing voucher participants might have a range of different titles. So you may be housing case managers, you may have housing in your job title, you may not, but whoever is the key person working with each voucher participant isn't in it alone. We have a number of support services to help you work with your clients to ensure that they're successful in their homes, because of course the goal of this program isn't just to help families with children experiencing homelessness get into homes and to have some assistance for 12 to 18 months, but it's to help them maintain their housing successfully and to sustain that housing and ultimately transfer to a permanent voucher. So in order to help you help your clients do that, there are some resources we want to make sure that you're aware of and have access to from the very beginning of the program. One of them is our housing retention services. And so these services complement the navigation and retention services that you're already offering to your clients. And this is a referral-based service that includes some mediation and informed support. So it can involve facilitation of that landlord-tenant communication, really help with relationship building, one-on-one coaching and support to help the tenant get connected to educational offerings, and also help with referrals. So this service is something that CBOEO offers to complement what you're already doing and is also there to help with crisis situations. And so one thing we really want to make sure that everyone knows and feels comfortable about is that if there is an issue that's threatening your client's housing stability, whether it happens in the first week of their tenancy, in the first month, or in the 11th month, we want to know about it and we want to help you address that, because we want to address things before they become crises most importantly. So it's very easy to get connected to our housing retention services. There'll be a link on our website and an easy referral form to fill out. You can also call our housing retention coordinator directly, and she will work with you and with the tenant and with the landlord as needed to help smooth things over and keep things working well to ensure that the families can stay in their homes. The other resource that we offer is direct support through our Vermont Tenants Hotline, which is available by calling 802-864-0099. Our amazing tenant advocate and team is available for quick questions, for bigger issues too. Any question that your clients have or you have related to the client's tenancy, we can help out with that and make referrals where needed. And we also have a really robust educational program that includes live workshops that are offered once a month. It also includes online, on-demand resources. So there are resources on our website that can be accessed at any time, and then there's also classes that folks can take at their own speed. And so these are things that are available to your clients and also to you as housing support workers and agencies. We highly encourage you to check out these resources, do the online self-paced class. There's an incredible amount of information all about tenants' rights and responsibilities that are going to help you help you be able to help your clients better. We are also very happy to do more like a train the trainer training and do a workshop and training for housing support workers in these renters' rights and responsibilities topics, and also for our Finding Housing class. So please feel free to reach out to us at any time. The links will be provided. And then we'd also encourage you to connect your clients to our personal finance classes through our Financial Futures program. So all really great resources that can help build housing stability and help ensure success for the family in the long term. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have any questions along the way. So the program is officially launched now. We'll begin accepting applications on February 1st. We'll put the website here in the chat so you can take a peek. All the forms are there. There may be some little changes that happen over the next few weeks, but it's really important, as Sandrine said, as you're going through this application process, that you fill out every part of the form. Check, double check, triple check before sending it in. It speeds up the process considerably. There have been so many times where a family's been just ready and their ability to move into a home has been held up because one box hasn't been checked on that form. So make sure to check all those boxes. Start working as soon as the coordinated entry referrals are made. Start working with your clients as soon as possible to get the applications completed and address any barriers that might come up. And also, as soon as the vouchers are issued, if you work with your clients to help them increase their stability and capability to ensure that at the end of this program they can move into a permanent voucher. We want to make sure that anything that might jeopardize someone's stability is addressed before it becomes a crisis, and we're here to help you with that.
Thank you, Jess. Okay, so I see that in the chat we have many questions. So I don't know, you want to go about this?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. Yeah, I'll try and facilitate, and folks can also raise their hand, and I'll try and call on folks. So I just want to name as a next step, and Jess mentioned that came back to this around at the end, but they're sharing information around how to help clients apply, and they have a website they've shared. Do not start submitting applications for any homeless family that you are working with. That is not what you're being invited to do. There are over 400 families experiencing homelessness in the state. We have 100 vouchers being made available. They're made available through the coordinated entry process, just like how we make available any housing resource for people experiencing homelessness. So following today's meeting, the coordinated entry lead agencies in each community will get an email from CBOEO and OEO saying, here's how many vouchers are available in your community, and they will use the coordinated entry process to identify families and identify their housing support workers and notify those families and housing support workers so that they can begin the application process. We're hoping the agencies can do that very quickly, and that folks can go ahead when families are identified, as Jess said, working with them on the application process so that when February 1st comes, you're ready to submit a complete application or quickly thereafter. And this is going to be really important, right? Especially for families who are in the transitional housing program. And of course, folks can start looking for housing as soon as possible and removing some barriers to housing. And with that, I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to look at the question. So there's been some questions about income. So what is the income? Are there income restrictions for clients? Do they have to have income? Maybe you can talk a little bit more, Sandrine, about
Yes.
household contributions, rent contribution and rent payments.
Yes, so the contribution for, because there is two different percentages that you have seen during this presentation. For the application process, they need to have 30% available to contribute towards their housing. So families without income, unfortunately, will not be able to participate until they are able to actually contribute 30% of their income towards that housing. Okay. The other portion is at the annual evaluation for extension. Then the consideration is made for households that are at 50% of the area median income, which is different from the application. So we have opened up a little bit more because these participants will have had worked towards increase of income if possible, and to stabilize their housing further into the future. So 50% will be the limit when it comes to the requirement, when it comes to the extension period after the annual review.
So Sandrine, let me ask a question just to make sure folks understand. Is there a limit to how much income folks can have when they apply to participate in the program? Could they have more than 50% area median income when they apply to the program?
They need to meet the FMR. They need to meet the FMR and the rental reasonableness. So at this point here, people that are making more than that will not be able to access because they will be over income. They can pay for that housing with their current income. So this program
so there's no income. So if a household, there's no income restriction on coming into the program. At a year into the program, so in other words, you could have 60% median income coming into the AMI coming into the program. There's no income threshold or income eligibility. A year into the program, if you want to extend your rental assistance beyond 12 months, it's if your income is below 50% AMI, right? And then what Sandrine is also saying is that households will be expected to pay 30% of their income towards housing. So at a certain point, a household is earning so much income that 30% of their income is they're just going to be paying 100% of their rent, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
So there's that piece to think about, like, but for the most part, families experiencing homelessness, that's not true. We know that's the case. And then the other piece that I hear Sandrine saying that I want to repeat back, and you can correct me, Sandrine, is that part of the application process is submitting a household budget. You need to be able to show that you have cash and non-cash benefits that can cover your household expenses, and that you're able to pay 30% of your income towards your housing. So you can't, for instance, a household could have a budget where, I'm just making this up, 100% of their income is going towards food costs. Well, they have income, their rental contribution is going to be $200 based on their level of income, but their budget isn't showing that they can pay $200 towards their housing costs. That's what Sandrine's talking about when she says their application and their budget and their income and expenses needs to be able to show that they can contribute 30% of their income towards their housing costs. So there's no hard and fast rule around income amount, but keep an eye on the fact that they will be told they need to contribute 30% of their income towards housing costs, and they need to show in their application that they can do that. Does that, hopefully, Sandrine, I got that right, and people, that makes sense.
Yes, one thing that we have seen in the CARES is that there were the budgets submitted with the application that didn't show that the family would be able to meet the 30% because of some expenses that were somewhat very high for some reason. And one thing that we're going to look at is really to see Because it is a requirement, unfortunately, we don't have 100% vouchers at this time. It's something that CARES was offering. So Sarah is definitely right on that part. Make sure that the budget actually shows the ability to pay those 30%. So,
That's right.
we can process the
Yeah,
application.
great.
Yeah.
And that's right. It's different than CARES because in CARES, folks could have, and in ERAP, people could have up to 100% of their rent paid. This voucher is not going to pay.
Correct.
It's going to be, people are going to have to contribute 30% of their income, which is
Correct.
very much like how a permanent housing choice voucher works, right? So, okay. So there's a couple other questions. One is I said that families will be prioritized through coordinated entry. There's 100 vouchers. I said, if you're working with a homeless family, don't just start filling out the application. Wait until your family has been identified through coordinated entry. So that was my point, I think, Jeanette, is that we have more than 400 families experiencing homelessness in Vermont. This program is for them, but it won't be able to serve all of them. So families will be referred through the coordinated entry process. I think most people understand that, how coordinated entry works, hopefully, but we can answer questions. Okay.
So I
there's
want
a
to make
question
a
is-
very clear, I want to make a very clear connection to FMR and rent reasonableness. During CARES, and I know that a lot of people will be thinking about CARES and all of a sudden submitting application, thinking that the FMR could be waived. We cannot waive the FMR at this time. And you need to make sure that they actually meet the FMR and rent reasonableness. This needs to be filled. You're going to see in the application, you're going to see in the form, there is no box to be checked for this specific requirement to be waived. I wanted to make sure that it is said.
Great. Thank you. Okay, great. There's a couple questions about what constitutes income, what's counted as income.
Income is what the most of housing services programs are actually considering as income. It has to be, as proof, Social Security award letters, income, wages with paychecks are being submitted. We do have most of the same requirement when it comes to proof of income as most programs. You will see, and I do believe it's included into one of the documentation we have provided into the website as part of those forms that will explain to you exactly and list what is considered as income, but it's mostly same. Yes.
And so reach up cash income. So your SNAP benefits wouldn't count as part of your income, but your reach up cash benefit would count as your income. So generally that's, and there is more information, like Sandrine's saying, in their policies and procedures. So I'm going to go back to some earlier questions just to make sure I don't miss any. There's a question about, are there form letters available for different pieces in the process? Are people going to need to write individual requests, for instance, when they need to ask to extend the search time? Sandrine.
Yes, so we have provided a list of appendixes in the website. You will see the forms that are required, all that are listed, all that was actually cited into this presentation will be available on the website. When it comes to the transfer forms, application transfer forms, letters of verification, what else can I say? Extension, annual view forms, all of that will be available or is already available on our website. So yes, we have provided as much as samples, not only samples of letters, but also forms required for you to fill complete on that website. You can also call us, you can also email us. So the access is definitely there for you to ask your questions as well.
Great. And there was a question if the inspection is needed prior to move-in, and the answer is yes, that is required. And you cannot apply for a home family voucher after you have already moved into housing.
Correct.
Okay, great. I think we've got a couple hands raised, and then I'll come back to the chat box. So let's see. I can't see full names. 1 second. How
Thanks
about
for
Rob?
names.
Yeah, Rob.
Thanks so much. Under housing support worker responsibilities, we talked about having the communication if there was services they're going to end, and ensure that the client has proper supports if services were to end. And you briefly mentioned, I think it was you, Sandrine, about some of those rare clients that once they get housed, they kind of drop off the face of the earth. When does CVOEO want us to inform them that they're not engaging in services? Is it when we as housing support workers get ready to say we have to close them out because of non-engagement, or do you want to know well before that?
So yes, that's when the retention services comes in. So if you see that there is a somewhat of a difficult situation, regardless of it is communicational or it is with the landlord or whatsoever, it would be good to connect with us, because our housing retention services are there for exactly these situations. When it comes to when you are about to close them, I would say that make sure that you are closing them. Although there is, the 30-day lapse where we might be able to open the case, make sure that you are closing them before connecting with us, because we will close them. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So meeting with a housing support worker monthly is a requirement of the program.
Yes, this is one of because we will be having, and this is something that we are still assessing, will it be bi-weekly or weekly meetings that will be offered to the group, so housing service worker will be able to come, and then we'll be able to actually to share how the program and how all those families are actually going through the process, and that would be definitely a good time for us also to assess if the connection has been made. I mean, it's not a 375 voucher we have here, is 100 vouchers. So we really hope that, although I know that we are, 100% busy and overwhelmed, but this is definitely something that we are asking you to do. At least one connection a month.
Okay, Sandrine, there's another question around who will conduct the inspections, and I believe you all are using the same housing quality inspection that we use through BSHA, and there's a form available for requesting that inspection. So it's not on the housing support worker to do that.
Correct.
There's a question about if a family has in the past lost a Section 8 voucher, for instance, due to damage in an apartment, could they be eligible for a home family voucher? And I believe that Section 8 eligibility doesn't impact somebody's ability to be in this program. However, would impact their ability, for instance, to transition to a housing choice voucher with a preference. So there'll be time to work on making resolution to the previous issue so that they could transition, hopefully, but it doesn't prevent them from being in this program. I think we answered the question around how much is the voucher. It's restricted by FMR, but it's also the rental assistance payment considers a household's contributing 30% of their income towards their housing costs. Is it correct that families need to be experiencing literal homelessness and fleeing domestic violence both to qualify? No, you don't need to be experiencing or fleeing domestic or sexual violence to qualify for this voucher.
It's not.
Will there be a preference for this voucher for housing choice voucher similar to the CARES voucher? Yes, we will work with the Vermont State Housing Authority on a preference for a housing choice voucher. It's not their preferences right now. Households in this program would be considered eligible for the current preference, but as their preferences change, we'll be working with them. And also, if there are other housing authorities that want to create a move-on preference to support households in this program transitioning to their housing choice voucher, I am happy to work with you at here at OEO to provide some technical assistance and work with other housing authorities on that. Okay.
So
Let's go to, yeah, go ahead.
So I want to mention something that Kevin just put in the chat right here, and it's about vacating the apartment or abandoning the apartment. We are asking, and this comes to Rob's question about when to notify us when someone just fell and you are closing them. We have had very huge challenges in recouping money. This is not what we would like to do. Recoupment is definitely a long process, especially for our fiscal office. So the earlier you do let us know that the apartment has been vacated, because we cannot pay for a unit that the participant is not living in. We are paying for a place where they are actually staying. So the sooner you do let us know, and this is when the once a month at least contact is very important, you should be able to actually know and start the process of closing or notifying us about the whereabouts or not of the client. And Jess, you want to add something to that?
Yeah, and just to add to that too, that's an example of a negative situation where you'd need to notify us. On the other side, notify us for the positive stuff too. So say if in the middle, if someone is awarded a 12-month voucher, but at month 6, they are able to get a permanent housing choice voucher, let us know about that too, because they can't, we want to make sure that the landlord isn't receiving 2 payments. And so that would be a very positive reason to notify us as soon as possible so that we can make sure that that gets noted, and then the household would have their housing choice voucher unimpeded forever, we hope.
Great.
Thank you, Jess.
All right, Jeanette, you've had your hand up very patiently. Go ahead.
I'm not sure that my question is relevant. I'll wait because I'm so new to this whole stuff. I'm
Okay,
really
sure.
trying to.
Yeah, maybe some follow-up. That's fine. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think there can be follow-up.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a question around vouchers will be distributed to the lead agencies. Is that true? So the vouchers aren't.
Yeah.
Oh, Sarah, you're muted.
You're muted?
Somehow I muted myself. All right. So the vouchers aren't distributed to lead agencies. Then lead agencies will be notified about the number of vouchers available for their community. They will then look at their master list, make sure it's updated, work with their coordinated entry partnership to identify and refer families that are prioritized on their master list for the voucher program. The piece that makes it more complicated is that there has to be somebody identified to play the role of the housing support worker. So those lead agencies will need to use that case conferencing table, which whatever they call it their coordinated entry partners, their housing review teams, their housing whatever their case conferencing table is, to make sure that they're clear on who the housing support worker is that's identified for the families. And then there'll be some notification of that staff person and that family that they are referred to that they can apply for this program. So that is how that will work. It's those lead agencies don't get to only pick clients that they're working with. Just to be clear, it goes through that sort of referral and prioritization process. Okay, there's a question confused about voucher amounts. Jeanette, maybe that's your question. Maybe let's come back to that piece. There's a question about dependents. Does there have to be a court statement regarding custody of the child to be considered a dependent of the parent? Sandrine and Jess.
Well, no. We are not going to the nitty-gritty of 51% at this time. But you need to have the IDs of the children in order for you to apply. The IDs are very important. So if the custody 51%, 50 is not in the mix, then it's all good to not have that. Right?
But Sandrine, folks
Because
could have, for instance, conditional custody. They could have child welfare involvement.
Yes,
all of those things don't restrict households from being referred to the
Correct.
program. There's no
Yes.
strict otherwise
Yes.
measure around dependence, child dependence, if that makes sense. And in fact, because housing is a really important way that we help families stay together, right?
Correct.
So we don't want to restrict access.
Mhm.
There's a question about what is my role as a McKinney-Vento liaison or homeless education liaison in this process? And I might suggest that your primary role is to make sure that families you know who are experiencing homelessness are referred to coordinated entry or are in coordinated entry so that they can have access to be referred to somebody who can help them with housing and they can have access to these kind of resources. And potentially to help that family during the transition process if they are referred to this program and if they're looking for housing, and transitioning into housing can be a big step for a family. So I might throw those two suggestions out there for homeless education liaison, but Sandrine or Jess, you want to add anything else?
I would just add that, connecting the families to the additional resources that we have, through our, our educational programs. And and the, both the classes that we offer, but I also wanted to highlight in response to a question that came up that it isn't just about Zoom classes and online classes. We also provide, that one-on-one support. Sometimes it's just a conversation with someone to help them understand their rights as a tenant, or help them learn more about ways to search for and find housing. So so connecting your clients to our retention, our Vermont Tenants program, the resources that we have and the people we have who can talk folks through and do one-on-one coaching and one-on-one education would be great.
I have to add also, we have the Vermont Tenants hotline. So if a crisis occurs, you can definitely call the hotline. I would suggest for you to actually take one of those classes. You'll see. I mean, you are the one, providing those this service, and the more informed you are, the more effective you will be. But this service is out there for you, so I will definitely encourage you to use them and to access them.
Great.
I would also just add, McKinney-Vento liaisons can be a really good support to the housing support worker during the process of finding a unit, right? So if they have school-aged children and they're trying to navigate while they're looking for a unit with a voucher and they're homeless and eligible for McKinney-Vento supports, making sure that the housing support worker knows that, because they're not going to be as fluent in those resources as you are as a liaison.
Great, thanks. Sorry for adding that. Okay, there's a question about when the original CARES vouchers ended. That project ended last summer, so there's no one with a CARES voucher anymore. There's a question is if somebody in the home family voucher project switches to a Section 8, in other words, transitions to a Section 8 during the 12 months, will that open up another slot for a family? And the answer, unfortunately, is no, because this project's being supported with one-time funding. But there are other resources available, and I wish I could say yes. Okay, but I didn't. And let's see. Since we all case manage another family residing in another district, if awarded in one district, which district contributes to the voucher? Okay, so this will be something where there'll have to be some communication, right? Because a family might be staying in a hotel in Rutland, but they really might want to live in their home community of Bennington, where their kids go to school, still in Bennington County. And they're in Rutland, so they might be on the Rutland coordinated entry list. They might be on the Bennington coordinated entry list. They might be on both. They might be prioritized for a voucher in Rutland and or in Bennington. So there will just have to be some communication. But anytime we have families or households on multiple coordinated entry lists, there has to be communication. So we already know that's part of what has to happen. I think the other piece is if the family wants to move back to Bennington, they may already be working with an agency in Bennington who's providing services. They may not. They might be working with agencies in Rutland. It's possible if Bennington was a home community that they were already connected to services in Bennington, right? It's possible they're not. So again, will have to be some communication. If they're going to be living in Bennington and searching for housing in Bennington, their voucher but they were prioritized for a voucher in Rutland. That's okay. We're still going to refer them for the voucher from the Rutland coordinated entry list. They can take that voucher anywhere. They can't take it out of state. That's the only thing. It has to be in Vermont. But they could take it up to Chittenden County. They could take it anywhere. There will have to be a conversation with that client and with the coordinated entry and with other providers, depending on their service needs, to figure out and identify who's going to be the housing support agency that's going to sign off on their application and commit to providing services for that client. So it does get trickier if they're looking out of district and they're not already connected to services in that district. For sure, that will be something tricky to navigate.
Right.
Great questions. Okay. Kevin, Jess, so we've got let's see, Shelley. For those of us in education, not social services housing, where do we direct families who are eligible? What's the correct language to use to encourage families to access this voucher? You're not going to actually direct them specifically to this voucher. What you're going to want to do and coordinate and make sure is happening is that family connected to housing help? And if a family is experiencing homelessness, you want to help them get connected to housing help. And the way to do that is a referral to the coordinated entry lead agency in your community. And if you don't know where that is, one of my colleagues will drop in the chat box the list of the coordinated entry lead agencies. And it's probably worth a conversation if you're a homeless education liaison and you're not familiar with that process on how to make a referral, to reach out to your coordinated entry lead agency and learn a little bit more about that process with them. Also want to recognize that just because you make that referral to the lead agency, might be, for instance, if you're in Washington County, it would be Capstone. It doesn't mean Capstone Community Action is going to provide ongoing services for that client. They're just going to help that client get connected to housing help. That's what coordinated entry does. And it helps clients access all the myriad amount of resources available to households, not just this program. So it's a really important referral. Okay, there's a question about whether you need live signatures, Sandrine and Jess.
Live or electronic signatures at this point.
Great.
So meaning that electronic signatures are still taken as good to receive.
Great. If you don't know what coordinated entry is, I'm going to refer you again to talk to your coordinated entry lead agencies. We must have had a great email go out on the Homeless Education Liaison listserv that a lot of you are here. I'm really excited about that. I'm going to encourage you to talk to your coordinated entry lead agency. There's also some training available on the Coalition to End Homelessness website that you can go through. It's self-directed training. Maybe I'll ask another one of my colleagues to see if they can drop the link to that. That will help orient you to what the heck I mean when I say coordinated entry. But essentially, it's the process for getting people connected to permanent housing if they're experiencing homelessness or if they're at risk. Once an applicant is housed, how can we, as a landlord liaison, contact, I think that's what LL means, contact someone at CVOEO. So what it, maybe just talk a little bit more about communication, or Sue, maybe if you're there, you can unmute and clarify your question.
Hi, yes,
yeah.
just a quick question. So if I work for Windham Windsor Housing Trust. So if we get accepting, if we begin getting vouchers for any of the applicants, if we have a question for CVOEO, who would we contact and how would we reach somebody there?
Wonderful. So we have a mailbox, and this is the one that was listed, which is home.fhvp@cvoeo.org. And we have a phone number. It's 802-660-3455, extension 735. So that extension is our general mailbox. So if you have any questions, please feel free. The line is open, right? So if you have any questions, just email or call us, right?
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and I think for landlords who have clients in this program, they'll get communication directly from CBOEO, right? That will have their contact information.
So the landlord, the participant, and the housing service worker, the people involved into the coordination services for this family will have definitely direct contact with CBO. Yeah.
Great. Okay, there is a question about pregnancy. Does it have to be third trimester? Is there any restriction around that?
Well, third semester. I think the third trimester. It's what we're gonna take as valuable
Okay.
criteria for the voucher.
Okay, so you'll clarify that in your policies and procedures.
Yes.
And great.
Mhm.
Okay, there, Kay just mentions she's a coordinated entry person that maybe the HMIS isn't allowing folks to be on multiple community lists right now. And maybe I'm just flagging that as something Ari can follow up with Kay. It's really outside the meeting, but thanks for flagging that, Kay. And then there's a question about what identification documents are required, Sandrine.
Well, identification document that you use to actually apply for state benefits. So non-driver's license, passport, student IDs, social security numbers. So the matching of the two. So it's the same. It's the same requirement as if they apply for I don't know, reach up or other services listing.
Okay. And you all have, that's in the policy and procedures, or it
Yes.
explains what documentation is needed, so folks can look at it there. Okay. Or it's in the application. All right, there's a question around, is the slideshow going to be made available? Yes, and this meeting is being recorded and it'll be posted and be available. Let's see what else we got. I think sometimes only a Social Security and SSA card is needed for the state. Diane
Social
is
Security and
asking.
SSA card? I'm sorry.
Diane, can you ask your question?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, sometimes, like a lot of times, only Social Security cards are needed, especially like even for Vermont state housing that are not looking for IDs, they're just looking for Social Security cards, or maybe I'm not in tuned with when those IDs are asked for, but a lot of times it's only the Social Security cards, no?
Well, at this time, the requirement will be for us to be able to identify the person that is actually being provided with the service. And usually you need some type of photo recognition of the person who's in the service. So if it is, yes. Mhm.
So IDs and Social Security cards is typical, but you need,
Yes.
but you're gonna need both.
Yes.
Okay, all right, very good. Thank you.
Okay. Great. And Yvonne says, actually, the SHA does require IDs, Social Security cards, and proof of birth. So, yeah, I don't think, Sandrine, so maybe there's a lot of questions around IDs and documentation. I think CBOEO, let me just suggest that they make sure that their application and the policies and procedures online clearly list what kind of documentation is required, IDs is required, and folks just refer to that, and that'll reflect what's required. If there's ongoing questions after that, they can try and clarify. Will the voucher rent amounts allowed reflect the rent hikes due to inflation and housing scarcity? Nancy, I think CBOEO stated they're using the FMR, the fair market rent, as the rent standard. And yeah, that can be challenging in the housing market. Also, the goal is to help households transition to a housing choice voucher. So want to be able to help their not rehouse folks into housing that then they can't afford in the long term or can't access permanent housing vouchers for to support that unit. So that's that's the reason behind that. This was an issue with the CARES housing voucher program, and that's why the decision was made by CBOEO. Okay, other questions? I don't see other questions.
I had a quick question.
It looks
I'm
like we
just
have
wondering-
a hand by another person named Ari, which, hello, I'm also Ari, and it's so nice to see another person with that name.
Oh, great, Ari, our other Ari, then please ask your question. Thank you.
Hi. Yeah, I was just wondering if there's any exceptions around the IDs for folks fleeing domestic violence who had to leave all their IDs behind and don't have any.
Yes.
Any.
Yes.
They're-
Yes,
they're-
Ari.
they're
Yes.
What would we need to submit instead of the IDs? The IDs for that, just a statement.
Well, there is just refresh my memory. There is a section of documents that actually touch upon the VAWA mentioned in the in those forms that we have uploaded. So which
Yeah,
one is it?
It's under the requirements and forms, and there's there are 3 documents that relate to VAWA rights. One is information for the landlord that the landlord needs to know. There's a release and there's a certification. And so all the information you need would be contained in those documents.
I
Great,
think they're
thank you.
also, yeah, I think Ari is asking the question also about during the application process, is there a way in that application process that they can make it known that somebody's fleeing domestic or sexual violence and so they're not able to meet your documentation requirements? And so I don't know that there's a specific form that you all have identified for that, but certainly probably a letter or something could suffice.
Yes, yes, totally.
Great.
The certification, I think that the certification form will do that.
Great, excellent, thank you. Is the 30-day extension due to housing scarcity or a one-time extension, or can it continue until housing is found? So after the 90 days, if they need an additional 30 days, how long can they keep asking for an extension, Sandrine?
Oh my goodness, that's a tough question. That's a very tough question. Let's say that it's a one-time 30-day extension at this time. That will be provided to a client who is not able to find a housing. It's the best answer I can give you at this time. It's 30 days notification extension.
But they could extend again for an additional 30 days potentially. It's not.
Potentially, they could.
Right. But it's on a case-by-case basis. People have to ask for it and make a case for their extension.
That's why it's very imperative for you to do that request on time and in writing, because we can extend until the end of the program, and then the voucher would be lost. So
that's right. So there is a point where it doesn't make sense to extend the time looking for housing, because they won't actually be able to make use of the rental assistance because of when the project will end. So that will ultimately be a point in time where those vouchers will expire. But short of bumping up against that date, they're not limited to one 30-day extension, but it's a case-by-case decision. Thank you for that clarification. Kay asks a question about what if someone's income changes while they have a voucher? Sandrine, maybe you could talk about how, for instance, their income goes down, they want their housing, their rent contribution to change. What's that process like?
So the evaluation of participation and contribution towards the voucher is definitely an option for the participant to do. So if their income actually decrease or increase, they can actually submit a new application with this information, notify CVOEO, and then go through the process so we can adjust the voucher. We need to notify the landlord, we need to notify the client as well, and the housing worker. So the process is pretty much simple, is that you notify, you go through the process, and we adjust the voucher.
Great. Any other questions? Oh goodness, you guys have some good ones. What about households who have partial custody? Do they have to be in the home full-time? No, they do not have to be in the home full-time. That was answered
Correct.
earlier. Would they always have to be at that 30% on the application renewal, or could they risk losing it? Okay, the expectation is that households will be expected to pay 30% of their income towards their housing costs, and that can adjust during time. If there's follow-up, maybe we can just, maybe you can unmute if we're missing your question.
Sure. Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Great. So my question actually came from reading the chat and seeing someone else, Ollie, had asked this question, and it was, say the family is working and the car broke down, which caused them to miss work, and then they were terminated from their position for this period of time. My question is, if there's a lapse in employment and their income has gone down, if they report that, essentially, could they risk losing the voucher because now they don't have that 30% to contribute to their portion?
No, there's
It's
no
not a requirement.
No.
It's
And if households' income goes up, they also don't have to report that. It's so there was another question about that. But
the annual, Sarah, the annual review.
Yes.
During the annual review, you don't have a choice. During that first year and the extension, you don't have to. It's optional. It's your choice. I think that there were a question about, or I did see it, but the difference between the 30% and 50%, and I know how it could be confusing. The household needs to be contributing 30% of their income towards their housing, of the net income toward their housing, okay? When it comes to the application process, there is no income limitation. But at the annual review, we only can serve people that are 50% at 50% what area median income. That's the difference. So at the application process, do come and then 30%. Of course, there's the FMR portion. So if you can actually afford your rent with whatever you're making, so you're not going to be able to be approved for that. But when comes the annual review, this is when we're going to look at your income. If you're over 50%, then we're not going to be able to extend. And that's the difference. So in your head, just say 30% net income. This is what the family needs to contribute. So they need to have income and they need to be able to contribute the 30%.
Great. Okay, excellent. Let's see, there's a question about whether or not folks must be have legal stat, or whether, let me see. Let me read it. Would people granted asylum? So would asylum seekers be eligible to apply for the project? And I think there's no citizenship requirement would be the answer to that, Sandrine, but maybe you can qualify and speak to that.
Yeah, well, I will refer to you because I'm not into really that specific guideline. Yeah. But what I know is that because of the documentation requirement, if the asylum seeker, for example, has a work permit, that means that they have a social security card and they are able to get a non-driver's license. So they have all this documentation to actually enable them to apply for the voucher, right? But when it comes to when they do not have these documents yet, so I defer to you, Sarah.
Yeah, I think there's lots of opportunities to waive documentation requirements. CVOEO can work on when an exception can be made. It is important though, and if someone doesn't have to have a particular immigration status or be a citizen to be in this program, keep in mind that the rental assistance is temporary, and so that would just be really important communication to have with any family in the project, is that the renter assistance will end and hopefully they'll be able to afford their rent when they're done, because one, they increase their income So housing support workers should be leaning into ways to help families increase their income. But two, because they will have the opportunity to transition to a housing choice voucher. Housing choice voucher has other limitations around who's eligible. So just kind of keep those things in mind, maybe.
So if you have an asylum seeker applicant that you would like to match, feel free to do it. We will consider it on a case-to-case basis anywhere regardless, because the requirements are so flexible.
Great. That's right. Okay. So I think that's a great place to stop for today, because we're kind of winding up today. And if there's additional questions or comments, I know CBOEO has made their phone number and email available in the chat box, the link to their website. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much to Sandrine, Jess, and the statewide housing team at CBOEO, and Paul Dragon, their executive director, who during the middle of a pandemic said, sure, we'll do this thing we've never done before and provide statewide rental assistance for 300 families. That sounds great. And they did that for the CARES Housing Voucher Program, and just were all hands on deck for that. So thank you for that. And thank you for, again, answering the call when we said, hey, how about doing it again? And what a fantastic opportunity. So thank you, Sandrine and Jess, and your team there, for your willingness to jump in and be a part of the solution. I'm so excited to launch this project, and I'm really excited for the opportunity to expand should the legislature appropriate additional funds. And I know there'll be lots and lots of questions, but the big takeaway is, one, make sure families experiencing homelessness are in coordinated entry. Two is coordinated entry lead agencies. Hurry up and look at your lists and work through your case conferencing team to identify families. And then three, housing support workers, start working with families on the application process, start breaking down their barriers to the application and to finding housing, and start looking for housing with those families, and submit your application on February 1st. So hopefully that's really clear, and really excited. Thanks, folks, for sticking around for an hour and a half as we walked through the program this afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Ari.